Unspoken Issues.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Unspoken Issues podcast. We are coming back at you here, ready to talk another poll winner. That's right. If you had the opportunity to hop onto the Unspoken Issues podcast Facebook page, we set up a couple polls there for our listeners and friends of the Facebook page to vote on, and it has been decided that tonight we are going to be talking X-Men number 11. Now, I'm going to bring up the poll and talk about that here in a second, but before I do,
democracy in action.
That's right, buddy. That's right. That right there is Dean Compton. Dean Compton, welcome back to the Unspoken Issues podcast.
The godfather of the Unspoken decade himself. The man who made it happen, the straw that stirs the drink. That's somebody else. I'm Dean Compton. Having a good time here tonight. What's funny is this is funny, a little inside baseball for the listeners. We were talking before we started recording. I was like, okay, I'll come on and I'll introduce it, and then we'll toss to Jesse, to do a little, just to get the framework going. And he's like, okay, you ready? I'm like, yeah. I start to go, launches right into that perfect introduction. So how are we going to take that out now?
Now hold on. I completely misheard you. I thought
it doesn't matter. It's just funny to give the listeners a little peek behind the curtain, like I'm the Wizard of fucking Oz or something. But no, it's great to be talking to you tonight, talking X-Men number 11. We pitted a couple of Jim Lee issues against each other. We asked the readers, the listeners to take a gander and see what they liked more, the first issue of Wildcats from Image or the last X-Men issue that Jim Lee did, and honestly may ever do if things continue with him being one of the head honchos over at the Distinguished Competition. So it's a very interesting juxtaposition there. We came away with X-Men, not very surprised. The X-Men, a juggernaut then, a juggernaut now. But do you lament a little bit that we didn't do Wildcats number 1, or were you on the X-Men side?
Both of these titles are they speak a lot to me. I was a mutant kid when I was growing up collecting comic books. It was the X-Men, X-Factor, whatever mutant mayhem I could get my hands on. I was usually reading that. I was a fan of the Wildcats when Image hit, so I would have loved to have had the chance to talk about that if we did, but I wanted to jump into something that I don't recall, at least right off the top of my head. Either one would have been perfectly fine with me. I chose X-Men number 11 just because I don't remember ever reading this one. So there you go. Oh, I see your picture there. There you go. Okay, so you chose Wildcats number 1.
Wildcats number 1. Yeah. Can't remember why I would have done that, because probably for a similar reason in that I know the X-Men a little better.
Okay.
I don't know the Wildcats as well. One of the big criticisms I have of Wildcats, and it always looked good, but you look at Spawn and Savage Dragon and Youngblood and Shadowhawk, and you can kind of feel that. Like, they created these guys. Eric Larson created Savage Dragon when he was like 4.
Yeah.
Todd McFarlane created Spawn when he was like in high school or college. Shadowhawk had been bouncing around Valentino's head a little bit, for a while. Youngblood, had been brought about by Liefeld in different forms at different times. The Executioners with Malibu that didn't come to pass. And I believe they had actually just appeared in like an issue of Megaton somewhere. I can't remember the exact issue off the top of my head, which Gary Carlson published. But the thing is Wildcats feels ersatz to me. You can kind of tell that when they broke away, like Jim Lee didn't have a passion project the way these guys did. Here's something that I created. Here's something that, I've had in my back pocket for a little bit, percolating in my subconscious. You can feel that with a lot of the other stuff, even if you don't necessarily like it. But with when I would read Wildcats, it just really felt like he needed a project rather than it was a burning desire to do a creation, if that makes any sense. But I want to give it another chance because I haven't read almost any Wildcats in probably 15 years, 10 years at least. So I was like, I would give it another chance. But I'm still happy to talk about X-Men number 11. I like the X-Men a lot more, although I'm not a big fan of this issue or this era. I think for me with Jim Lee's X-Men, I love the way they look. I love the cool moments. I love the idea of them. I love shit like the cards that he did. I love that kind of thing. The ephemera, if you will. The action figure line in 1990. But when I actually read the comic books, I don't enjoy them as much as you'd think based on how much I like them conceptually. But you picked them up, as they were happening. I didn't really get into it around like 92 or whatever. And I find that my point of view on that is not the dominant point of view, Jesse. Most people just straight up just really love these guys, these issues, and so I want to take a good look at it and try and be fair. But to be honest, I thought X-Men number 11 is a little lackluster, but I know we got a little groundwork before this building gets up. So go ahead and lay some. I know you got some info.
Yeah. So I mean, we're looking at X-Men number 11 just to kind of hit some of the big stats here.
X-Men Volume 2, like this is the adjectiveless X-Men. The Uncanny X-Men has the numbering from 1963. This is the one that started with the what did sell 7 million copies? X-Men number 1.
It was up there. It was definitely up there.
Almost as many as I've sold.
I got half of them sitting in a long box over here.
right. Not bought them myself.
So, X-Men number 11 hits the stands June 16th, 1992. Creative team, just kind of, drop that here. We got Jim Lee, we got Scott Lobdell, Bob Wiacek, Louis Buhalis, Marie Javins, or Javins. I don't know if the J silent, but I'll do both of them there. Bob Harris and Tom DeFalco all played a part in getting this issue out there. Now, I can tell you on the Unspoken Issues podcast, a lot of times what we do is we just hop into the issue, and that's pretty much what I did here. Whoa, real quick. Before we get into the synopsis, I need to tell you about one of our sponsors, and that's Amazon Music. You may have a hard time finding Dazzler's disco pop parade of hits from the 70s, but you can find Donna Summer's Summer, the original hits album featuring Hot Stuff, Bad Girls, and She Works Hard for the Money. If you head to getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network, you can get a free 30-day trial where you can check out over 70 million songs. That's getamazonmusic.com/W2M Network for that free 30-day trial. All right, so we pick up on Mojo World, where it appears some of the X-Men are under the influence of something to attack their friends, all in the name of ratings for a show put on by the one and only Mojo. Luckily, Allison Blair, a.k.a. Dazzler, is secretly meeting with a dispatched clone of Mojo called Mojo 2.
Very clever.
The sequel. And trust me, the sequel is what is written in the book. I'm not being funny.
He demands to be called it.
That's right. Bitter for his discarding, Mojo 2 plans to cause Mojo's broadcast of the battle to fail. This will in turn cause the ratings to fall, and Mojo's reign will come to an end. In the fray, it appears Longshot and Beast are the only two that have not been under whatever spell Mojo has the rest of his team, desperately trying to come up with a plan to cease the fighting between Psylocke, Cyclops, Wolverine, Lila Cheney, Rogue, Gambit, and Jubilee. Meanwhile, Charles Xavier is a prisoner of Mojo, and he's making him watch his students battle. But little does Mojo know that Xavier has been able to psychically reach out to his team, starting with Psylocke, to begin to break Mojo's hold. One by one, the teams merge their minds to become free, and with the help of Dazzler and Mojo, the sequel, are able to bust through the Mojonium shielded observation bay to confront Mojo. It is then that scores of spiked citizens, I put spiked, I'm going to have to double check that, but it says scores of spiked citizens of the Mojoverse storm the room, as well demanding that this season is over. But with blasts from his hands, Mojo strikes him down. Enraged, Longshot leaps through the air with a sword in hand, striking and apparently killing Mojo. At the end of the issue, the team contemplate their next move and what the world will hold for them, all while advising Mojo 2 to rule the planet fairly. There you go. That is X-Men number 11.
Those were some words.
Yes, they were.
Those were some words.
I need to double check something here. I said spiked citizens? Now, yeah. I write these synopsises out. Spined. Thank you, sir. Oh, my goodness. I wondered what in the world I was doing.
Because they refer to their citizens as spined and spineless. Because everybody's a viewer, right? Since everybody's a viewer, the ones with spines are the ones, like in our world, they'd send an email or they would boycott an advertiser because it was on a show. They're the ones who will show some spirit and give flack in regard to what they watch. The spineless ones are just like, hey, if it's on, that's for me.
I mean, just like you said, that was some words. Now, we do have a little bit of a follow-up at the end of this issue. I don't know if you want to talk about it right now.
We can talk about it, sure.
This is Maverick, okay?
Yeah.
The Maverick story, which is titled Over Again, Written by Scott Lobdell, Mark Teixeira on the art, and Lois Buhalis as letterer. So who is Maverick? Well, we learned a little bit about Maverick in this backup. Now, this is, I think, I can't remember. I know
it's a continuation of a story called the Xavier Files. Like, he's trying to find these files that I believe Xavier has cobbled together that have like dossiers on all the mutants. I think that's it. I don't remember a lot about it. I only remember reading this on like the back of a Maverick card and like an X-Men set or something like that.
A baddie by the name of Dr. Reiking appears to have Warhawk, a dude that looks very much like Colossus. And when you're going into something like this blind, I was like, why is Colossus doing this? Why is he such a jerk?
Right.
And it is not Colossus. It is a guy by the name of Warhawk at his side to help protect him from the mercenary Maverick. The comic opens after Maverick just unloaded a load of bullets into Warhawk, and we learn that his Warhawk's omnium skin protects him. Omnium. We got Majonium. We got Omnium. Punching Maverick through a wall, Dr. Reiking pleads for Warhawk to kill Maverick, and he is glad to oblige because he does not like Maverick's friends, the X-Men. Trying to recover as Warhawk heads to find him, Maverick loads a hydraulic bolt gun and ends up plugging the holes started by his earlier spray. That takes some skill, by the way. He put holes in them with bullets earlier, and he's now plugging the holes with a gun, a bolt gun, as a matter of fact.
What a plan.
It is, yes. This penetrates Warhawk's skin, causing energy to leak out and a potential massive explosion. Begging for his life, Dr. Reiking says he does not know how the Xavier files wound up in Charles' possession. However, Maverick does nothing to save him as Warhawk explodes, I assume, killing them both. So there's our follow-up story.
So the Xavier files are, just like I said, they're profiles of the powers and weaknesses of various mutants, which, Xavier had put together.
What do you think of Maverick here, man?
He's one of those guys that I like. I don't know much about. I just like him because he looks cool. He's got what I call the Sid Vicious effect. Sid Vicious in wrestling, man, that dude, I don't think he cut a terrible promo, but you wouldn't say he was like a go-to promo guy. And he worked an okay big man match, but nobody's going to confuse him with a great worker, a great big man like Bam Bam Bigelow or Vader. But man, he just stands there and I'm interested. All he's got to do is stand there. And I just want to, I'm like, wow, that guy, he's got presence. And that's what it is with him. And Maverick has a cool costume. He carries a cool gun. He has a power that sort of doesn't make sense. So you can just explain it however you like. And I like him. So I like him for that reason. That's mostly it. I don't know much about him other. His real name's David North. He later dies of the legacy virus. I know he gets better, and I know he had his own series. He had a solo series later in the 90s, like somewhere around like 97, I want to say. But I haven't read a whole lot of it, maybe an issue or two, but mostly I thought it was cool to have a backup. I'm not a big Scott Lobdell fan, so I don't think it read very well. I don't think he does very good dialogue, but I do think it was paced nicely. I think that Omnium thing was just whatever, but Maverick himself, he's just a cool guy to look at. And in the X-Men world, especially at this time, I don't want to say that it was all substance over style, but man, if that steak didn't sizzle, I wasn't going to eat it.
I hear you, dude. You look at this guy's costume, and I remember when I first saw Maverick, the same thing occurred to me. This dude looks awesome. I mean, I'm paying attention. Far be it, though, that I did not have the opportunity to read much with him in it.
Same. Yeah, I mean, he dies not long after this. I want to say he's dead like 2 years later in real time, 2.5 years later, because he's one of the first casualties of the legacy virus, because they had to kill somebody for it to get over. And so I think him and Magic were the big casualties of it. Maybe by somebody else I'm not thinking about.
Created by John Byrne and Jim Lee. So interesting.
Well, John Byrne was scripting X-Men for a little bit after Chris Claremont left because Jim Lee wasn't confident in his scripting abilities yet. And so John Byrne took it because he was like, oh, this will be easy and I'll make a ton of money. And from what I understand of the story, he did make a ton of money. I think he did it for like 3 or 4 issues. I can't recall exactly, but the books were so late. It was taking him so long. He was also doing, I think, Namor at the time. He was doing his own Next Men at the time over at Dark Horse. Probably had some other irons in the fire because he was fairly prolific in the early 90s. And he's like, I don't have the time to wait on this. And then I got to script it in like 2 fucking days. It doesn't matter that it's a pile of cash. I can deal without this big pile of cash. Got some smaller piles of cash because I just don't need the headache.
Yeah.
Spending all that cash on Excedrin.
Let's go to the main course here. Let's talk about our main story, our why we came here tonight, which was the last hurrah for Jim Lee with his X-Men. Okay, so I went down the synopsis. The characters here that are the classic X-Men that I know and love. Dazzler at this point is in a relationship with Longshot. More on that later. What's your thoughts here in regards to the team that we get in this book? I mean, to me, it feels like the classic X-Men because this is the X-Men I knew. But go ahead.
Yeah. It's the animated X-Men. It's most of the team. It's most of the X-Men. I'm sitting here actually looking at a poster as we talk about this that has like all the X characters from the time on it, done by Jim Lee. And you're looking at it, and this. The X-Men were so large and unwieldy. It was unfortunate that they were blue and gold at the time. And this is the blue team, I believe. That was unfortunate to me in a way, but also I understand there were like 16 X-Men or something, so they all couldn't be in the same book. And some of my favorites were in the other book, Storm and Colossus in particular. But you look at these guys, except for Jubilee, who I just do not care for Jubilee. These are the X-Men, and these are the X-Men that I love. And if I said X-Men to anybody within 5 to 10 years of my age range, closer to 5 for sure, either way, these are the X-Men. They're, like I said, they're the ones you saw, most of the ones you saw on the Saturday morning cartoon. Most of them had an action figure by this point, or were about to get one at this point, rather. And, it warms your heart. The only complaint I honestly have about this lineup, other than Jubilee, which, that's just going to come out. That's just how it is. Anytime she's around, I just don't care for it. It's Wolverine, man. Like, I just prefer that, that brown and yellow costume.
Oh, really?
Oh, man, the brown and yellow is where it's at. I collect that costume. Like, any Funko Pop or action figure that has that costume, like, I try and get it. Like, that's where it's at. I understand why they changed it. They wanted everybody to kind of have a similar color pastiche, and that color pastiche harkens back to the OG X-Men, the original 5, because they wore a similar color palette. But, like, man, Wolverine in the brown and yellow, that's where it's at, bro. That's where it's at. Especially if he's got the X on his belt. Oh, man.
Oh, nice. I enjoy both of them. I mean, the yellow.
I like both of them. I don't hate either of them. I'm sorry, I didn't cut you off. But yeah, I'm with you. Like, it's like I'm going to shit on the other one.
Yeah, the yellow is the most iconic. So, yeah,
it's wild because for me, it's not. Because when I was like little, like I remember like the Secret Wars action figure that had Wolverine, which it was brown and yellow.
Yep.
And I remember like you would see Wolverine, like even before I got to comic books, so I was like 3rd and 4th grade. He was a guy I knew who he was, even though I wasn't super into comic books at the time. And that's how he looked. And I think that Art Adams poster where he's coming at you, I think I saw that in like Walmart or something when I was like in 4th or 5th grade. And I didn't get into comics big till 7th grade. So for me, like that is the iconic one. And when they changed it, I was like, how dare they turn their back on tradition?
Oh, wow.
So it's weird. It's weird how your point of view just changes depending on, when you got on. I guess, the train's either going too fast or too slow, depending on when you got on and how far it is to your stop.
So I respect both of them. I can remember a lot of early issues, like, that Meltdown, the team up between Havoc and Wolverine. I don't know.
Yeah, the Epic Comics joint.
Yep. Brown costume all the way, fit well. It seemed darker, like as if Wolverine could get ninja. Yeah, as if Wolverine could get much darker. If they would have changed the character of Wolverine, then I would have had a problem.
I was gonna say, as long as he stays cool as hell, as long as the dynamic between him and Cyclops is, he's like, I'm about to do something really cool. And Cyclops is like, Wolverine, don't do anything cool. Then Wolverine's like, it doesn't matter what he's wearing.
Exactly. So tell me about what are your thoughts on Mojo as a villain? I mean, me personally, just before you get started there, I've always found he is a weird villain. He's strange. Although he's probably one of the most well-known, he is absolutely, when you see Mojo, who he is, what he looks like, but he was so odd. He's this gelatinous blob, with these spider-looking legs. Not a whole lot of history with the character itself, but your thoughts on Mojo?
Well, I think you're right. Mojo's a weird villain, and I think he fills one of the roles that superheroes really need, in that especially powerful superheroes and powerful superhero teams, and the X-Men are a fairly powerful team, especially at this time. Especially if you put the blue and the gold team together. I mean, it's incredible firepower. Mm-hmm. But he fills kind of the role in that, like, it's hard to beat Mojo just by punching him. It's hard to just zap a ray at him. So I think he fills that role that's needed. I think the thing that makes Mojo difficult is that if you don't have a lot of socio-political commentary about the military telecommunications complex, it's hard to use him because that's basically what he is. He is a techno communications fascist, and you're supposed to use him as a backdrop to make commentary about our greater society. And I think that's and especially the role that communications play in it. As somebody who works in the media, I see a lot of the things that Mojo's saying, and like, no, there's nobody, you know, who I've worked for who's like, yeah, just kill those people who don't have any spines, who are just out there watching whatever flop we put on.
Yeah,
nobody's ever said that, but they've certainly said things where like they don't really care if like you're not, you know, active, if you're not, you know, emailing the station, if you're not somebody who's willing to take part, fill out surveys, respond when they want it, show up at their remotes, etc. They're like, why do I care? You can just sit there and watch whatever. So I think that's part of it. Then also part of it is like, where does the government stop and where does the media begin? Even in a society with like a free press. I mean, the government provides so many press releases and so much material in a world of 24/7 news. They're going to be your like number one source just because you need to have something on all the time, because you need to have these eyes fixed, because that's where the power lay. And if you don't have an interesting story to tell in regard to, you know, those kind of issues, and they can get complex, and there's no reason you can't explore them in a superhero comic, but it's nuanced, and that's not something Lobdell and Jim Lee do well, in my opinion. They don't do nuance very well, and that's why I find this issue, like, I like Mojo. I think he has a really cool look that's different. Like I said, he's different. You have to approach him differently. Winning means something different in the Mojo verse, but like this is just a fight. Like, oh, he hypnotized the X-Men, and the X-Men are fighting each other, and then his imperfect clone's gonna show up, and he's gonna have a clever name. He's always gonna call himself Mojo 2 the sequel, and then they're gonna fight, and then he's gonna leave in charge. And it's just, I don't think it works because, and this is no offense to Lobdell or Jim Lee either, I don't think they're interested in those subjects enough to tackle them in a way to make Mojo the relevant villain he was then, and arguably would be more now.
I can see exactly where you're coming from, because they could have done a lot more with him.
Right. I mean, I don't mean to sound like Fox News or MSNBC or something there, just go off on this large tirade with a bunch of things. But villains, but when you have a villain like that, you know, you have to approach that carefully. And you're right. Like, and to be fair, I didn't read the prior issues. You know, I mean, I skimmed them real quick, but it didn't seem like they got much deeper into it there. I think they just thought that Mojo looked cool and they wanted to use him, so they did, and that makes it feel flat to me as far as getting the most out of Mojo and making Mojo the scariest, most intimidating threat he could be.
The final big thing that occurs just like in the most minuscule writing on the final page as the X-Men are looking off into the distance, contemplating what their future is going to be, is Dazzler and Longshot standing beside each other. Now, one of the big things that occurs that I didn't bring up in the synopsis is that Charles Xavier breaks the news that Dazzler is pregnant.
Yeah, that's rude.
Yeah.
They hadn't told nobody else yet. Why are you telling everybody?
Yeah.
That's terrible. A lot of people keep that to themselves for like lots of different reasons. You are a fucking telepath, bro. You should know every one of those reasons why they wouldn't want you to just say that out there. He just outs it like out of nowhere. But telepaths just do that in the X-Men world. Like later with the all different X-Men, when the original X-Men like come to the present, like Jean Grey just outs Iceman as gay, like in front of everybody. What is it with you X-Men telepaths? Hey, we know, you know. That doesn't mean we want everybody to know.
Exactly. And I know there's a list out there with all the reasons to hate Charles Xavier, so just go ahead and add that to it.
Right. I mean, with Charles Xavier, he's so weird because, like, yeah, you look at some of this shit and he's been so manipulative, especially the way they've retconned stuff for, like, I don't know what, the last, like, 15, 20 years or so. But, like, for me, like, Charles Xavier, when I think of him, he's always the nice grandpa from the cartoon. He's like, oh, no, don't do that. I'm worried about my X-Men.
Okay.
Have they ruined that character? Because I don't keep up a lot with modern comics. You know that. Like, I kind of peripherally keep up with what's going on. But every time I read anything that anybody says about Charles Xavier, I long for the one who his big mistake was telling people that Dazzler was pregnant.
Yeah. I tell you what we'll do. Listeners, if you have the opportunity to listen to this episode and you want to tell us how much of a horrible person Charles Xavier is, let us know in the comments. I'm right there with you, Dean. I don't read modern stuff. What I do though is I listen to podcasts that talk a lot about modern comics. And yes, I've heard some pretty bad stuff about
I've heard some
Xavier
bad stuff
too.
So. But he just remains the cool dude on the cartoon who, don't get me wrong, it's a little arrogant. It doesn't always get things right, but for the most part, he means the best for his X-Men and the entire world.
Yeah. So the quote is, just in time, it would seem, for the greater gift could two parents give to the unborn child I sense within Allison. Right out there in the open.
Right. Who will someday be your father, Longshot.
Yeah, so, okay. So there it is. So
No. I didn't open a can of worms. I just opened a barrel of worms and then dumped a truck of worms on top of it.
Ah, man. So the end of the story with the X-Men, like I said, in minuscule writing, Allison and Longshot are just kind of standing behind the X-Men. They're both staring at Allison's tummy, and she says, Shatterstar, you've got to be kidding. And okay.
Right.
So,
also, I agree with her. What the fuck, bro? Like, you must be kidding, because what?
I remember when I was reading this, and like I said, I don't think I'd read this issue before. I remember sitting there going, whoa, wait a second. This was revelatory to me. Yeah, you said you jumped onto the wiki. I'm not asking you to say anything other than what you told me, which was, I think you said something along the lines of it gave you a headache or gave your headache a headache.
Yeah, you get in there. It's one of those things where like Shatterstar is apparently his own, or Shatterstar is Longshot's son, but Shatterstar is like a clone. His clone goes back in time and is Longshot's dad or something. I can't remember exactly. And I know I'm getting it really wrong, and it's probably not as complicated as I'm making it out to be if like you read the issues and you're just going through it. But I remember just all this back and forth and this roundabout and everything, and I was like, it just gave me a headache just to even try and piece it together. It was that's one of the biggest flaws of the X-Men at this time, and I think the X-Men for the most part, even when I don't care for it, was firing on all cylinders around this time. Sales were out the wazoo. Their profile, they were about to be very public. They were already pretty mainstream. Like the X-Men were somebody that you knew about, even if you weren't into comic books. Like even like 3 or 4 years before this, they had gained enough steam to where they had, I wouldn't say they were like a mainstream household name, but every other household at least knew about them. The flaw is they hyper connected everything. So whether I individually, whether I personally cared about this issue or not, or issues here or there, or I thought this could be better, whatever, it's obviously working. But they wanted everything to be hyper connected. I think because like it worked with cable, we liked that. So here's another thing. How about Shatterstar and Longshot? Am I right, guys? And I think they started doing that a whole bunch, and I think that was detrimental to the X-Men, the part of the Marvel Universe that was the X-Men at that time. And I think this is a really good example of it. Is there's no real reason to complicate it a whole lot. If Shatterstar's Longshot's kid, just make it so. But there's no need to put that weird, complicated cherry on top.
Yeah, we were clamoring for stuff like that. I know I was wanting stuff like that just because, at this point, a few years earlier, I'm intrigued with cable. I'm intrigued with what happened there. I love
even Rachel Summers with Excalibur.
Exactly.
I'm not saying that that's not good, but when it goes wrong, it's really wrong. And can you and I agree that the Shatterstar Longshot thing is just weird and wrong? There's a annual crossover called Shattershot. It does not make it any clearer.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where anyway. So I agree. I agree with you 100%. It's complicated. It is unnecessarily complicated.
It's not just complicated, but it just gets icky. And I think that's a big problem when we look at 90s comics now, is there's a lot of stuff that like at the time you didn't think about, but like now we're like, was that really, is that really necessary? It just feels it feels gross.
Do you have a panel / page that you would like to choose?
My favorite is the last page. I guess it's the last page that Jim Lee ever drew of the X-Men, at least for they got published, because it's iconic. Like I saw that page a lot. When I first got into comic book, I loved those Entertainment This Month and American Entertainment ads for the same company based out of Virginia. And like, I'm sure you remember them. They'd have all the hot books and like all this stuff. They'd have all the logos, big Cyberforce. Number one's going to be hot.
I know what you're talking about.
And they used that image with Jubilee blowing the bubble and all the X-Men standing there, just looking cool as fuck, forever. And so like that image, just when I turned the page and saw that, it just gave me just an incredible sense of warmth, an incredible sense of young. I could remember it was like it was summer of 1992 again, and I was starting to go to the comic book store regularly. Like I said, the first time I went was June of 92, and I have an air conditioner, and it's hot as hell in my room in Arkansas, and I'm upstairs. They got the windows open. I got a fan in my window. I got a Cardinals baseball game on the radio because it's the only baseball I could get in on the radio, or the only one I could get in reliably. I could go across the AM, but Cardinals I could get an FM station a little bit. And I would just flip through the books, any comic book I could get, any magazine about comic books I could get. I wanted the information, and I would just go to a page like that. And even though there wasn't a lot of on there besides like issue numbers and prices, I would know what was coming out. I would know some trades. And so that image I remember. So that image is just associated with, some great nights with some off-brand Dr. Pepper, baseball on the radio, and me discovering a world that I would stay in for the rest of my life.
Very nice. I tell you what. I am going to go with the one panel where Wolverine is about to shish kebab Jubilee. He's charging at her, and it's the quintessential Wolverine leaping pose where he's got his arms, elbows back, and he's got his claws snicked, and they're ready to go. I love that action piece with Wolverine in it, and that's kind of like the Wolverine that I remember. And
yeah, he's always doing that to me, or he's got like one claw up and he's beckoning, like on the cover of a Wolverine Limited Series #1, or his arms and claws are like crossed in front of his chest.
Yep,
like that's it. Those are the I picture Wolverine in my head. It's one of those three for the most part. Also, maybe when he's stabbing somebody when they're on the ground in the X-Men game, because that's dope. X-Men arcade game. Obviously, I assume everybody listening has played it, but if you haven't, you should really just stop listening right now and find a way to play it.
It is a blast, and that was the
game is based on Pride of the X-Men, like the straight to VHS pilot for an X-Men cartoon that didn't get picked up.
I recall that. Yeah.
So that's why they look like that. That's why the X-Men that are in there look the way they do. That's why that roster is the one that's chosen. Because that'd be a big question. It's like, why are these X-Men were never really together at once, but like that's why they're on the cartoon. All the enemies were on the cartoon. So except Wendigo, I think they just slapped him. We gotta have somebody else.
But anything else on the issue?
The only other thing I would say is it feels very much like a last issue. All the resolution. It feels like the last episode of like a drama. To be honest with you, a lot of things are resolved. People say very nice things to each other. Somebody gonna have a baby, and like on the last page, there's like class photo. So
yeah,
it feels very much like a last issue in a lot of ways. And obviously, it was Jim Lee's swan song. And if you ask me to be a betting man, I think someday he'll do the X-Men.
Yeah, you're probably right. The comments that we have here, Chris Bailey during the poll was he was advocating for Wildcats. He said Wildcats fools get on it, and 9 votes for X-Men, 5 for Wildcats. So almost double for X-Men number 11. The other things I'm going to bring up here are from while I was reading it, I was going through and posting some images and some fun things to talk about. I did post a photo of Mojo 2, which I didn't ask you. Did you have any opinion about Mojo 2 other than he's the sequel?
I don't want to sound sacrilegious. I know you go to church or whatever, but to me, I feel the way that God talked once, where he was like, listen, I would rather you come before me cold than come before me lukewarm. You come before me lukewarm, I'm just going to spit you out. You're wasting my fucking time, right? Like Mojo, he's lukewarm. That's what he is. Come to me cold. Like piss me off or make me love you, make me feel something. But as it is, like, it is hard to care whatsoever about that character. It's just, I mean, no offense to anybody, but like I said, I feel like when that was put in the Bible, it was about Mojo 2, the sequel.
You could tell that, okay, we're throwing him in here. Get ready, ladies and gentlemen. We got Mojo 2, the sequel. Right. You're like, okay, well, what am I supposed to expect? I remember reading this and going, okay, he's helping him out. Well, he's going to be taking over Mojoverse. Now, a friend of ours on the Facebook site, he said that, this is John Ellis, he said, introduced as a villain in the Jim Lee drawn X-Men cards, that's where Mojo 2 showed up. Right. But he says he thinks in the actual comic he was reduced to being sort of benign, and yes, that is correct.
He is. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, but like not even benign, like tepidly rightfully so. Like, it's not like he's like, hey man, my dad's terrible, the person I was cloned from is the worst, I'm gonna get in here and these people deserve better. He never gives like the big Spartacus speech. He never does anything that like to make you be like to make you like super care about like why he's going for this. It's more like he's like, well, I'm his clone, so that's what clones do, so here we are, let's do this.
Why wasn't he the one to take out Mojo? Why wasn't he the one to be like bringing down the sword? Now, granted, Longshot's had a bit of history with Mojo. So
yeah. I don't have a problem with Longshot being the guy, but like I do have, but like he just kind of just, you know, there was no like moment where it's like Dio was mine as his clone, as his offspring, my right thing. He's just like, all right, cool, I'm in charge now.
Yeah, and maybe
they're supposed to think that he's subtly like being a villain, like he's playing this role to like, you know, to be like, haha, oh, I'll just turn on him, and maybe that does happen, you know, or whatever. But like, if that's so, it fell a little flat. You did it too good.
Yeah. Evan Bevins chimes in and says he once fought Squirrel Girl, which took me by surprise. I had no idea, but yes,
she fought everybody and she beat them all.
She did. John Ellis chimed in again. He says the original design in the Jim Lee X cards was more grotesque as well. I recall that instead of long flowing blue hair, he had a sallow flap of flesh hanging from his scalp. So I did not see that, but he actually
that like looked like a scrotum. Like, I don't mean this to be blue. Like, that just looked bad.
I'm looking at it right now. It does not look good.
I vaguely remember it. I was like, this is not good. I mean, honestly, it just seems like they like the name for whatever reason, which I don't actually dislike it as long as you always say the sequel. But sort of like, it seems like they just wanted to use that name and they had to, you know, put somebody on it and put a look on it. It's sort of like Sister Act 2 back in the Habit. You know, you're not really interested in this one.
Yeah.
You know, we're not going to. It's got a good title. Like, that's a good title. But then you watch, like, I just watched the first one.
I posted a picture of the revelation that Allison was giving Longshot a hard time for possibly pre-naming the child Shatterstar. So I posted that. John Ellis once again chimed in. He says Shatterstar was originally described by himself in New Mutants number 99 as being basically grown in a lab by Mojo's slaves. Though Liefeld later clarified he was originally pitched as Longshot's son, there's a whole slew of deeply convoluted retcons regarding his background, origin, and identity. As to whether he actually is their son, last I recall, the official explanation is kind of, but it's complicated. Then we have some comments about the Dazzler movie, which, have you ever read that? The Dazzler movie graphic novel?
A long time ago. I'll read it again at some point. I like Dazzler as a character. I think it's a fascinating concept. I think I really love her original look, but I really like the look she had here too. Like, it's funny because like she goes from like, that's a disco look with the roller skates and, you know, the big the big mask and everything and the bell bottoms, and then she goes to like kind of this look, which is a little more, I'd say, blondie new wave punk. So it's like she changed with the times, and I'm not gonna lie, Jesse, I respect that.
Yeah, well, that's good. There was...
I have both the figures. You got to have both.
Anyway, I think that's all the comments that we had on the Facebook. Well, I want to thank everybody that really has had, interacted with us while I was reading that and posting stuff. We do appreciate it.
The only thing I really want to say is at one point in the issue, like, Beast is talking really weird and funny, and apparently he can still think for himself.
Yeah.
But the only way I know it is somebody like, there's like a line about it. It's never explored. Nothing comes of it. All the other X-Men are under the control, Mojo's control, except him. And apparently all he's done to him is make him talk, like a Looney Tunes character. Like, instead of saying like 601, he's like, Rick's wondering to run. I guess it's not Looney Tunes, it's Scooby-Doo.
Oh,
why?
True, yeah.
And why bring it up if you're not going to do anything with it? And I think that's emblematic of this issue as a whole. It does feel like a last issue. A lot of things, it's weird. It feels like it sums up Jim Lee's run, not sums up, but like it finishes his run nicely in a way. But the issue itself leaves a lot of things hanging where you're like, wow, that was just dropped 2 panels ago. I guess we're not going to talk about that anymore. Mm-hmm. So I think that was the thing that stood out to me in this issue. It's incredibly dichotomous. premise and that it feels incredibly like a last issue, but also feels like it leaves a lot of things in the air in the middle that could have been summed up. I don't even mean in the future, but like literally in this issue. They could have told me more about that, summed up what was going on, etc. as far as Beast goes. So I think that's how I feel about the issue. I'll probably give it like a B- just because it looks great. It looks great. You can't take anything, it looks so good it overcomes any of those flaws.
Yeah.
And that's what I think a lot of people say about a lot of Jim Lee's work.
Here's the thing. I think they said that Wildcats #1 goes on sale 2 months after this. Wildcats #1, at least according to the wiki, has it August 1992. So that's not a long gap before you see Jim Lee back on the shelf.
No, and it also means that he was, and we know this, he was working on both books at the same time. And maybe that's why some of this stuff winds up in the air here. And maybe that's why some things don't get all the way fleshed out as well as you'd like. Jim Lee's attention was incredibly divided. Keep in mind, not just doing 2 books, because that's I don't want to say that's easy, because it's obviously not true. People just don't do it very often anymore. But the real thing was Jim Lee was doing 2 books and also engaging in a business partnership with 6 people, doing things that none of them, with the exception of Jim Valentino and maybe Eric Larson, had really ever done before.
Yeah.
As far as the business side of comics and stuff.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get into plugs, man. What do you got to plug? I mean, I know me and you do some stuff every once in a while, either in podcast land or throwing some stuff there on the Unspoken Decade page. So I heard the words Unspoken Decade, and this would be a good time to plug a sponsor of the W2M network, and that is Grammarly. For you, the listeners of the Unspoken Issues podcast, Grammarly is offering a free download of the Grammarly software. Grammarly's AI-powered products help people communicate more effectively. Grammarly helps you write mistake-free on Gmail, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and nearly anywhere else you write on the web. Grammarly corrects hundreds of grammar, punctuation, and spelling mistakes, and also, while catching contextual errors, improving your vocabulary, and suggesting style improvements. To download Grammarly today, go to getgrammarly.com/W2M network. Again, that's getgrammarly.com/W2M network to download Grammarly for free. Why don't you go ahead and let our listeners know where they can find you, what we are doing this for, what's the deal?
Well, we're at the UnspokenDecade.com, as everybody knows here. And, we're doing this because we love 90s comics, and historically they've gotten a bad rap. I think people are coming around a little bit on them, and I think now our mission has changed a little bit in that, like, we still want to focus on them and look at 90s comics and say what we like and what we don't like about them. But we're also not going to allow people to do revisionist history about the events that happened there, or also what was good and bad about the 90s as well. So I think, recently there's been some, it's funny because for years there was just like, oh, they all suck. And now people are like, that was the best comics have ever been. Every one of them was great for, and I don't think that's necessarily true either. So we're dealing with that as well. Mostly it's a love of comics. It's a love of comics from that era. And most of us were young then. So it's also a love of being young and trying to remember what it was like to be that young and reminding y'all what it was like to be that young.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe this year I'll write something. I'll get something good going for everybody because, I missed it and I think y'all miss it too.
Yeah. Well, you can.
I know you do. I know you learned to read just to read my post.
That's right. As a matter of fact, it was comics and Unspoken Decade. How did you know? That's how I learned to read.
Exactly.
So you can find me at Stiznarchy on Twitter if you do so wish. We want to give a shout out to the Rattlich and Broadcasting Network and, of course, the W2M Network as well for hosting the podcast. I really I'm on all sorts of podcasts. Chris Armstrong and I, we've thrown some great Unspoken Issues podcasts together there in the past. Dean Compton's been on a few. We have some other fantastic guests that's been on, Al Sedano, Evan Bevins. So if you like 90s comics and you like the podcast, if you haven't found us just because you're hanging out in the Unspoken Issues Facebook group, you can check out the Unspoken Issues Facebook page and you can participate in letting us know the type of content that we are going to be covering. Like, this was one of 2 options. And the good thing is we can go, I don't know how many options we can put on a poll, but at some point I imagine there's going to be this huge throwdown of like 10 different topics for people to pick from. Come on over and vote.
We got more in the pipeline. We're already talking, before we started this, we were talking about some more stuff we're going to do. So, be looking out for some more stuff, and feel free to come over over there and suggest stuff that you'd like to see as well, even if it's not in a poll. You know, we're always looking for suggestions to take a look at things, and feel free to suggest anything that you'd like to see written out in long form. Cindy Fan and I will take a look and see if maybe we can get to it. Check us out over on Twitter at Unspoken Decade. I post over there irregularly, but I do post there some, so you'll see some cool covers there usually, and sometimes my musings about comic books I'm currently reading, because I'm currently reading the Ultraverse in its entirety. And
nice.
So I've said a few things about it.
Very cool. Very cool.
None of them clever, but I have said them.
They have been said. Those were words.
Words were not unsaid in this instance.
All right. Well, for Dean Compton, I am Jesse Starcher. We will catch you next time. Have a good one. Bye-bye.